Yeah, we are live again, so you can start whenever you're ready.
Wonderful. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Just give me a second to set up my timer. Okay, I'll be starting now. So we're told by Gov Whip that Ivan has the capacity to make his own decision. So if he goes and punches Claudia on a recommendation, that's not Ivan's fault. Well, the problem is that Gov Whip isn't president of the United States and the head of the entire US military force. Three things in my speech. Firstly, the issue of justification. Secondly, the issue of whether or not the US will cooperate. And thirdly, the various extent impacts of this debate. I'll be showing you how at closing Gov uniquely, we're winning all three of these. The first one, justification, where we're told again and again by both top benches, the president is not responsible. First response pointed out by me in a POI, brought up by my speaker. If the president is in fact not responsible and the issue with the US war crime machine does not sit at the top, why is there a US war crime machine? Why does it continuously repeat its mistakes over and over again if we are in fact holding people accountable? And LSE is like, well, you know, people just go into the military because they're violent. Clearly isn't enough, because clearly we ought to be able to control this and create the sort of system in which this sort of stuff is held accountable. The absence of that sort of accountability implies a sort of top-down problem and implies fundamentally then that there is something done wrong at the highest level of governance, in this case, the president. Secondly, you say in the case that a president is genuinely not accountable, the president will be found not guilty. What's the big deal there? Thirdly, we say even in the case that the president is in fact not guilty and we end up prosecuting innocent man, I mean, big whoop, we're willing to trade off like 4 people for all of the various benefits that you get for prosecuting a president, right? So if somebody is found not guilty, big whoop, we're compromising the justice system for 4 people, trade-off, many benefits happen. Next, we say also that the president has a lot more power than they're giving them credit for. The president of the United States is the head of the executive. They're not a prime minister of Britain. They're not vested with their power solely by the parliament or the senate around them. They have independent capacity to make decisions, pass executive orders, and do things of that sort. Finally, it's not just on-ground issues which are war crimes. Fabricating reasons for an invasion is also a war crime. We think presidents are very much culpable in this. Justification clearly taken by us. Secondly, will the US cooperate? And we hear majorly one point here, which is that the US is not going to cooperate because presidents don't want to do this themselves right now, because it's going to bite them in the ass later. Several responses. First of all, the short-termist incentive for the president in power at this point in time could very much be to just catch out a president across partisan lines, because, for instance, Biden has a great incentive to put Trump up because it's part of his entire political agenda has been saying, I'm not Trump. And note also, you basically just need one successful prosecution for all of our impacts to take place and for all future US presidents and the entire US machine to feel more accountable in the future. So if even one president ends up being held accountable, this works for us. But secondly, we say presidents do things even though it might end up biting them in the ass all the time. So for instance, we think that both parties consistently pack the Supreme Court in the United States, even though they know the other party is going to be doing that in the future as well, right? So the idea that just because something has bipartisan impact means that it doesn't work isn't actually empirically held up within the United States itself. Secondly, we hear from these people that popularities of these presidents are high during times of war, so people won't want to end up prosecuting them because it's going to look badly on them in the future. My response to this is people can very conveniently develop political amnesia all the time. Bush might have been very popular during wartime, but became incredibly unpopular after wartime, right? So we think that this sort of political amnesia very quickly sets in whenever we need this to happen. Now, what I want to tell you right now is that we've uniquely proven to you why the United States is likely to cooperate. There's several reasons for this. One, because the United States has many incentives to challenge other actors in the status quo, which is only going to happen if the ICC is actually doing what they want them to do. For instance, the United States want to be able to use the ICC against Russia. For instance, the United States wants to be able to use the ICC against African states which are currently cooperating with China. If they can dig up dirt in them to bring them down, they want to be able to do that. This means the United States needs the ICC to have legitimacy, and that legitimacy can only happen if the US is willing to step into this itself. Also, ever since Trump left, the United States has had an incentive to move towards its internationalist, to boost its internationalist image again, something which again only happens if you're willing to cooperate with international organizations like the ICC. Why is this analysis crucial? This is crucial because we are activating OG's principal analysis. This is a necessary prerequisite to it. They said it is important to prosecute people. We are telling you why it's possible to prosecute these people because of US willingness. Before I continue, I'll take OO.
If both Gov teams want to claim the US doesn't give its generals, how in the world would they give literal presidents, especially as an investigation into them might also implicate current officials who worked in their administrations, which is why they won't give classified info just like that. Biden was Obama's fucking advisor.
A couple of responses. Firstly, they are giving some generals, low-level ones, yeah, because they've been hesitant to give high-level ones, but we don't think that they would hesitate to the degree of not giving them, given all the structure analysis we've given. And secondly, I mean, it's also easier to get the lower-level generals and the entire brass of the military once you've given up the top guy, simply because that precedent gets established. But I'll discuss this a bit further in my impact point as well. Just finishing off the US cooperation point, we hear a couple of further responses from CEO here, basically about how the panel is just likely to not find the US culpable because it's going to be made up of risk-averse countries, so we're going to nominate judges who don't want to find you accountable. Several responses. Firstly, this won't apply. The UK won't be afraid of finding the US guilty because the US is willing to comply. It's not like you're finding the US right now guilty. You'll be finding whichever president did this 10 years ago guilty. No biggie over there. Secondly, we said the appointees, even if they're unwilling to be very effective members of this panel, still lead to investigations, still lead to information coming out. Once the information comes out, this still leads to pressure on the ICC to pass these decisions, still means it's likelier that something happens. Next, we also tell you that even if these people are likelier than not to be willing to actually make the right decision on the ICC, because we don't think you go to the ICC for status. We think you go there because you're likely ideologically motivated. You're the sort of person who's gone through a very idealistic law degree your entire life and wants to be involved in doing good. So we think that the sort of character of person who's going to be on the ICC necessarily implies that they're probably going to make the right decision. Final issue, impacts. A few things over here. Majorly, OO's analysis, you're less likely to trial others and you won't punish the important people. Firstly, that's just not true because different bodies are trialing different people, right? So the US internally has a lot of war crimes trials for its own military. So we don't think that there's a necessary compromise over here. It's not just the ICC who trials people. The ICC trials the president, different bodies trial other groups. That works out for us. Secondly, we think you're still likely to trial other people because during these presidential trials, more information is unearthed, a specific benefit brought to you by closing government. And that information leads to ease of access in actually trialing other people throughout the entire military. But thirdly, we also tell you, even if we don't end up trialing the lower downs, the impact of trialing the higher ups is so much greater in terms of the institutional accountability that it imposes throughout the US Army that, again, our earlier analysis applies. It is more important to do what reduces war crimes than it is to do what holds the right people accountable for war crimes, because nothing here is more important than stopping these things in the first place. But furthermore, we also tell you that the information which comes out during these trials has more extant benefits. One, it leads to closure for all of the various people who've been harmed by these US wars throughout the world. Second, we tell you it leads to more responsible behavior in the future for the United States because they know all of their actions have paper trails. These classified documents will be declassified, and they know that there's no way to simply cloak and dagger their way through everything by keeping everything under their wraps. Finally, we also think that other countries across the world are likely to behave less belligerently if the United States has been trialed, because the indication that the strongest country in the world can have its presidents held accountable in front of a court of law implies that anybody can. Ultimately, we think that the US has committed some of the worst war crimes in the world. Presidents have helmed these, and by holding these presidents accountable, we can reduce these war crimes in the future, and nothing would make us happier. Very proud to propose.